So Axios is a JavaScript library that helps us make AJAX calls to APIs. We'll be using this to make requests for data in the form of JSON. This is what Axios works best with, because by default, when we make a request with Axios, when it receives the JSON, it turns it into JavaScript for us. We can skip the whole parsing step. In fact, it sets up the XHR object, it sets up the onReady state changes with all the error handling built into it. All we have to tell it is it a get, post, put, or delete request, and where to send it. It'll come back with the response and let us handle it. A few acronyms that we should be somewhat familiar with now. AJAX allows us to load web pages asynchronously or update pages. This is kind of what we've been going through, the process of making it to the front end, to the server, and then back to the front end. There was a lot of code that, as we can see with the XHR object, it's a lot of code. This slims it down into 1 or 2 lines, which is really nice. And in general, Axios does explicitly what it does and does well. It doesn't have a lot of extra features because, in general, the creators said we resist adding features that can be implemented in user land, meaning you can implement this with your own logic. Axios's purpose is to take the 15 lines of code it would take you to set up one request and slim it down to one statement. So you don't have to worry about writing an XHR object every single time you make a request. We talked briefly about APIs in our restaurant analogy. Who was the API? The kitchen, the one that prepares and sends back to the server. The food is the JSON, that's what we're sending. Last, and now we're to Axios. So Axios is an NPM package. What does that mean? How do I get it? Yeah, we're back in Node land. However, everything that we're getting with Node is also available in vanilla land, meaning not Node, using an HTML page. So I'm going to show you the difference between these two, and then we'll jump into Axios. So let's say I'm not using Node, but in my JavaScript, I would like to use someone else's code. Let's Bootstrap or Axios or any of those libraries. How do you import somebody's code without using the require statement? Because you can't use this if you're linked to HTML. If I can't require it, how do I tell my HTML that I have this package to use? Well, how do you tell your HTML that you have a JavaScript file? Script. If it's somebody else's JavaScript file, it's still a script tag. So one way to use Axios, and this is how you'll have to use it for the project coming up, is by using its CDN. Another acronym, woohoo. Does anyone know what CDN stands for? Content Delivery Network. A CDN is simply a URL that gives you content when you link it to an HTML page. So if I wanted to use readline sync without using Node, I would have to import it through a CDN or a script tag. If I'm using it in Node, then I npm install and I require it. 2 different interfaces, they can't be mixed and matched. So let's find the Axios CDN so we can use it here. What I'll type in is Google search is Axios CDN. CDNJS.com is the most used. It says, hey, here's this Axios CDNJS.com, let's go there. It provides these 4 links. There's the Axios, the Axios.map, the Axios.min, the min.map. Honestly, it doesn't matter which one you use, but the preferred is either the top of the list or the min. Min just means minified, so it's been shrunken down to computer language. It's pretty much impossible for us to read, but it still does the same thing. Axios, this is the full library before it's minified. Either of these will work. Whichever one you choose, you just need to click the copy button, then add a script tag at the bottom of your HTML and source it to that URL. Super glitchy? All right, let me thank you. Okay. So with this script tag, I now have the access to use Axios. So in my JavaScript, even though I haven't done something like this, this is what we'd have to do if we npm installed Axios and we're using it in Node. But this won't work with HTML. What I can actually do now is just say console log Axios and hope that it exists. Oh, I hope. So what our local host where the web browser is, I'll open up the console, and I haven't linked my own JavaScript page. Okay. And no one caught it. Sorry. It's all right. No, I should have missed that. So yeah, now I have two script tags, and that's fine. I want my page to load and then Axios to load, or vice versa. I'm not really sure. But in my JavaScript, I'm going to console log Axios to see if the package exists. And what do I get? Why? Why is this not defined? I can tell you right now that the script tags, this is how you pull it in. So why isn't this defined? Which one of these files is loading first? Yeah, my file is loading first before the CDN has a chance to load Axios. So when it hits my file first, this doesn't exist yet. If I move this down, now I don't get undefined. I get a big function. That is Axios. It looks a little interesting. So let's, instead of console logging it, let's console dir it. Okay. Okay. Lots of functions. But are there any functions in here that you recognize their name? Here's post and put. There's get. There's delete. So those are the 4 functions we'll be using out of the Axios package. Now, why does this variable suddenly make sense to our JavaScript page? The same reason, why does this make sense to our page? How come my JavaScript knows what the document is if I haven't declared this variable? Once you link something to the HTML page, those variables exist in your JavaScript. So this makes the document available, this makes Axios available. And I think this is the only project we'll ever use a secondary script tag. After this, everything is done in Node. But we gotta do one at least like this. So we get Axios. Great. And we have the 4 requests. So a get is axios.get. A post. Anyone want to take a guess? So good. Put. This one's tough. Axios.put. And delete. So these are the 4 methods we get to use to make our requests. This one thing replaces the entire, this whole thing, where we say xhr equals new XML HTTP request, xhr.open, get URL, xhr.send, on ready state change equals a function. When I say axios.get, it does all of this for me. Woohoo! I feel like you're happy on the inside. It's hard to show it sometimes. So no more having to say this. Oh, if you're on the Pokemon assignment, you still have to do it this way. But after the Pokemon assignment, Axios only, for now. So how do we do these requests? How does the syntax work? Let's use our favorite. Well, maybe not your favorite, but the vSchool to-do API. So I'm going to get the base URL again and replace it with my name. And I'm going to make a GET request to this. And I'd like to see my data the same way. So I'll call the function axios.get, and the first argument of all 4 of these methods are the exact same. Where do you want me to go? And I give it the URL. And that's all that's necessary. This does the open, the send, and the on ready state change setup. Well, how do we know when it gets back? How did they build this? So let's try this first. Now I'm doing this as an example. We will be erasing this. This is bad syntax. Don't think this is the way we do it. We don't set a variable equal to it. But let's see what we get when we do that. Oh, I should probably console log it. Well, that's weird. What's this? Has anyone ever seen a promise like this before? New word. So we'll talk a lot about promises further on in this course. But you have to think of a promise just like when someone promises you something. I'll go do this. I promise. When I'm done with it, I'll let you know. So whenever we send a request through Axios, it immediately returns a promise saying, I'm on it. The problem is this will always be a pending request. So we never want to say const data equals because this will never be our data. It'll always just be a pending, it's coming eventually, I promise. So how do we actually get the data we need? Well, when we make the request with an XHR object, when data comes back, what are the two states it can come back as? Okay, maybe a better question. It'll either go well or it'll go bad. What does that mean? You either get your data or you get a big fat error. So Axios.get is built that way, or Axios all of these are built that way. It's going to come back with one of two things, either your data or a big error. So there's two methods you chain on to the .get to handle one of these two eventualities. If things went well, then let's handle it. If things went bad, then let's catch it. And you'll commonly see these split onto their own lines like so. So go get this URL. If everything went well, then do the following. If things went bad, catch it and let me know about it. So if things went well, it's given back to you as a form of a function. We'll call this the response. If we were to write this without ES6, it would look like this, kind of like our higher order array methods. But ES6 syntax makes this a lot prettier to handle. We can just say response, fat arrow, curly brackets. And now if I were to console.log response, I'm going to see what came back from this request. So let's see that. There we go. Refresh. Okay, so here's that object, response. Where's my array in that response object? Data. Hey, there's my to-dos. So this is nice. Axios will always give you the response as response.data. Now, the thing you're looking for might be further nested inside of this object, but it is always response.data. Thank you, Axios. Consistency, it's good. Well, what if something goes wrong? Like, I've got the wrong URL. My user on my website doesn't know about it. That's unfortunate. They open up the console, which no user ever does, but unless they're a developer. They'd come in here and see there's a fail something, uncaught error, blah, blah, 404. This big blob of error. So how do we catch the error and stop it from perpetrating and breaking our program? Well, that's what this is for. Just like the .then gives us the response, the catch gives us the error in the same form as a function, so we can console log the actual error that occurred. So now that this is throwing an error, let's see what the caught error looks like because we're console logging it. Hey, look at that. This is what came back from the server. If I dir it, we might be able to see it a bit better. Nope, this is giving us a blob. How about console.error my error? Oh, it's about the same thing, but prettier text. Okay. But it is showing me, here's your console log on line 14. This is the error that came back from the server. So every time we do get, post, put, or delete with Axios, it always has a dot then, and it always has a dot catch in that order. What does dot then mean? If the dot then is what happens, what does that mean about our request? It was successful. Status 200, ready state is 4. But down here, this means ready state was 4, but the status was not 200 or 201. It was something like 500 or 400, some sort of error status. Well, if response.data is my array of to-dos, how can I get them from here to showing up all the to-dos titles here? Cool, let's try that. So I got my response.data, so I'll pull it out into its own piece. I'll say const to-dos equals response.data. So now I've got an array of to-dos that I can use. What's next to get the titles to show up? What have we done in the functions to get all the Pokemon names to show up? So that's if I want to create it for one, but what if I want this process to repeat for all the to-dos? Okay, so yeah, we could do a for loop or a for each. We'll do for loop for now. And then it's the 3-step process. Create the element, add the text, append the element. Const p tag equals document dot create element. Make me a p tag. Make the p tag's text content equal to the current to-do's title. So we'll say the to-do at index of whatever you're at, dot title, should be the text content. And then we'll tell it to put it on the DOM. And we get our 3 to-do titles to show up. I don't really like the P anymore. Let's do a H1, except that just grabbed both of those. P tag. Okay, so we can see them. So my 3 to-dos show up. So this is just fine. I can write this whole block of code in my response. But how did we do it with the Pokemon one? Did we write all of our code right inside of the ready state change function? Yeah, we wrote another function, something like list to-dos or list Pokemon that expects an array, and then we'll do this process to make this happen. So where would all of this code go? Yeah, we move it down here into this function. Now my to-dos aren't showing up. So now how do I get my to-dos to show up again? What do I need to add here? Response.data. And they are, I need to change this now instead of, I'll just change it to to-dos, but not to change a lot. And oh yeah, I overwrote it, thank you. Off. I could, yeah, if I wanted to declare it separately, I could say const to-dos equals response.data, just so I know what this is. And then I can pass in to-dos. This receives it. Again, I can call this whatever I want. I can call it array. It'll still work as long as it's consistent for my loop and my application. So this is what we're going to be doing with Axios.
Is that just better convince it to keep that function separate?
Yes, yeah. Otherwise, this one function is going to get enormous. And functions are meant to do one thing and one thing really well. If you find it doing 10 things really well, break that into at least a couple functions. It gets harder though. As you split things into functions, your program becomes more abstract because you're taking out a bite-sized piece of logic and another that all depend on each other, and then you have to put them back in the right order. So while we are heading towards trying to break everything into their own function, for this project, the to-dos project, you might just have this one function and it might be 100 lines long. That's okay. Let's work it out all in one block. we can worry about splitting it up. But I wouldn't do it all in here. Any questions to start off with the Axios syntax? We're going to hit it a few times here, but
I got a question for Axios. Why can't you just install it at the end? You'd have to use like Webpack or something.
you have to use Webpack to compile your node into vanilla JavaScript. So that's why we're not using require, we're using the CDN so that we can see it on the page. Yeah, be aware if I npm installed Axios, I wouldn't be able to link it to my HTML page. Wouldn't work. So I'm going to throw a big what question at you, or what I would like to do cat question. What I would like to do is that when the user visits my website, I don't want them to see the to-dos right away. This is just my own personal preference. Instead, I would like to have a button that says list to-dos. And when they click said button, that's when these show up. Ooh. What would I have to change about my JavaScript to handle this? Let's think for a second. Absorb it. Think, use mind's power. Yeah. Okay, that's enough thinking time. No. Do I need to change anything about my JavaScript? What's wrong? What's bad about how it's listed right now? Does it give the user the ability to click a button and then see the titles? Yeah, every time I load the page, this is getting read again and will happen immediately. So how do I make sure that this doesn't happen immediately? Yes, and what does an on-click event need to fire? It does. So an event listener takes the event type, and then what's the second argument of an event listener? A function. Well, this isn't a function. This is a method being used. So if I don't want this to be called immediately, I need to put it into a function so I can call it when I want it to happen.
Did you take that list to use function? Put that within the events?
No, because this is the chain effect, right? If this happens, then this will happen automatically because I'm calling the function in here. So what I really need to do is I need to tie this down to a button click. The only way to do that is to make sure it only fires once the user wants you to. The only way to do that is by wrapping it in a function. I'll call this get to dos, and I'll just wrap everything we wrote there in a function. Now they're not showing up. But if I call the function get to dos, it works again. So if I can just plug this into an event listener, I now have the user now has the ability to generate this when they want to. Did that little change make sense? Wrapping a function, we're sustaining its inevitable call until we want it to happen? Or, I don't know what word. Okay. Well, on the HTML page, what do I need? I need a button. Get my to-dos. Sweet, we have this awesome button that does nothing. Do I need to add anything else to my HTML before I go back and add to my JavaScript? Why do we need an ID? How do I add an event to this button? Your JavaScript. How do I grab this from JavaScript? ID is pretty nice, yeah. So this is the get button. Get button. So I'm going to grab that now. Const get button equals document get element by ID get button. Now for the random name to generate a random lucky person, Eric. After I ask the question, I would like to add an event listener to this button that fires this function when it's clicked. That's a good start. What's that phrase to add an event listener? There's got to be a word that like apply event listener or insert event listener. Sweet. Listener. Cool. What's the event? It's got to be blur. Nope. Click. Cool. And what is the function we'd like to happen when they click? Yeah, so if we call this function, it'll do the request. When it comes back, it'll call our list, and then it will list it out. We have this chain reaction firing here. So when I click get to-dos, with parentheses or without parentheses? Yes or no on that? It is a function, so wait, why isn't it waiting for my button click? I told it to wait for click. Yeah, it's reading down. It's like, cool, go get the button, add an event listener, and call it now. Don't call it now. Wait till I click, please, and then call it. So what we have done, this is a big mess of code, which we'll cover again, but I have now waited to do this event. Now when I click, it goes, gets it from the server, and then lists it out. Who knew that a single button click on a website would involve so much? Well, this is just how it goes. So questions on this process before we kind of reiterate on it, show a little bit more, and try a post with Axios. What is the first thing that fires on this page when the user clicks the button? Get to-dos, okay. That goes and gets the to-dos. If it comes back well, we get a response. If it comes back bad, we get an error. But it comes back well because we've tried and tested this. We get our response data. Now what line of code runs next? 16, and then what line? 24, 25, and then this will repeat a few times. As soon as we call this function, it jumps right to where it is and executes it. 3 times. So I'm going to put an example of each of these underneath. So we got an axios.get of here. That gets a dot then and a dot catch. And if it helps you, write it like that. Write your get request or your post put whatever, and immediately chain on the dot then and dot catch, and then put them on their own lines so it's easier to read as you're working out what should happen if it comes back well or comes back badly. The dot then, what does the dot then come back with? The response object. What does the catch come back with? The error object. That's how you do a get request with Axios. Where did I have to parse the JSON back into JavaScript? Where did I write JSON.parse? I didn't. When we get the response, Axios has already parsed it for us. Response is JavaScript, great. I don't have to worry about turning it into JSON or turning it into JavaScript from JSON, it does it for me. As well, when I do a post request, I don't have to send JSON. I can send a JavaScript object, it'll stringify it into JSON for me as well. So it's taking a lot of these intermediary steps out of the loop, making this much more imperative or declarative. Declarative. I can say go get, and it does all that XHR stuff. When you come back, cool. Here's my JavaScript, go do something with it. Okay. So what I'm considering is we do the get and post today to see how that works. And then tomorrow through Friday, we'll incrementally introduce the delete and the put. So this is working code, and part of me doesn't want to give it out because I want you to try it, but you know, I'll probably still will. I'm that guy. It's just me giving out too many notes can be a hindrance. Just be aware of that. If you're depending heavily on notes to get through anything, try not to, whatever that means. Mm. Yeah, and like you get the assignment, you work through it, and you're like, I swear my logic is right. That's when you go check. You don't have it side by side. You're like, all right, write this line first, I write this line second. Unless it's like your absolutely first time, you can't remember a single word. Sure. But please don't take the notes and be like, I need that function. I'm going to go put it right here. Because I'm going to come ask you what something's doing. And if it's my code, good luck. Try to explain my code. Yeah. So there's the get request. Now, what if I wanted this to load when the page loads? I don't want a button. Either on load, or I could just say, don't be in a function, just happen when the page loads. So that would work. However, though, I think it's safe to wrap all of these in functions. It says, what if I want to get my to-dos later in the program? Like it's been updated, I want to go get them again. All I have to do is call this function again, and it happens, rather than having to write all this out again. I can call this whenever I want all the to-dos gotten and relisted. Okay, post request. We know the endpoint is the same as the get request, and the syntax of when it comes back is also the exact same. It'll come back with a dot then with the response, which will be our new to-do added to the database, or dot catch with an error that it wasn't able to save for some reason. Tabbing over is killing me. Okay. Well, what's different about a post and a get? I said that fast. What is the difference between a post request and a get request? Yeah. Get takes, post gives. I like that. Well, what do we give on a post? What do we send along with it in Postman? We're in Postman. We send it a body of an object we'd like it to have. Now in Postman, we have to use JSON because we're not using Axios that turns it into JSON for us. In JavaScript land, we just need to add an object to this post request so it knows how to save it or knows what to save. So in a post request, the first argument is the URL, but it actually takes a second argument that is the object to be added to the database. And we can just give it as a JavaScript object. It'll convert it to JSON for us. The hard part is how do we get the user's info of what they'd like to post? We need the forms back. We went away from them for a few days, but they're back full force now. Oh no. Oh God, no. It's fun. So we're gonna group this as the get request. We don't need any of this for the post right now. HTML land, how do I, what do I need form-wise? I know I need a form tag, that's a given, and an input tag. And probably a button for the form. We'll say add to do. What attributes does my form and input need? In order for me to be able to grab them from my JavaScript and use them. And give them an ID, or even better, a name, name. So let's give it a name. We'll call this the add to do form, and we'll give this input a name. Stop auto-completing. Give this a name of what input is this representing? What is the one property you must send to the to-do API? Title. We have to send a title. So I'm going to make this the input for title. So I'm just going to give the name of title and the placeholder so we can see it. Title. It's like, give me the new title, click this button, and you should magically see a fourth to-do add down here. Oh, this is interesting. I keep clicking this button and they just keep getting. So click this button and we should see it show up. Okay. Do I need to add anything else to my form? I could give it an ID if I wanted to select it that way, but since they have names, I can just select it through that. Forms get that special pass with the name attribute.
I feel like that's all.
I couldn't hear that. Okay. So let's grab our form, the add to do form, document.add to do form. Right, I don't need to say document.getElementById. by ID. When I add a name, I can say document.theForm name, which is the add to do form, and that's not going to work. Why? What is add minus to do minus form? Because that's how JavaScript reads this. Well, that's tough because this is an object. I'd like to grab the form. What's the other notation I can use other than dot? Bracket notation. We could do it that way, but we've got a second notation for grabbing items out of an object. We forget about it all the time. If we get rid of the dot and use brackets instead, and then wrap our little word in quotes, it's just like saying the dot notation, but it allows us to use words that have dashes and such. Hey, so we grabbed the form. So I'll say const add to do form equals go grab the form. And I'm using this notation just so it's being reminded, but you could have easily called it the add to do form in the HTML and use the dot notation. But where's the fun in that? What event do forms get? Prove it, yeah, submit, and a callback function. What do submit events do to your web page by default? Cool. How do you, how do you prevent default? Like that. And we're ready for our form. Well, we only have one input. One input we need to get the value from. How do I get the value from this input? Yep, so it's sitting here. I need to grab it from in JavaScript though. How do I use the names? Yes, I say, here's my form. So let me do this. I'll say const to do title equals my add to do form has a dot title input. And I can do this because the input has a name, not an ID. If it had an ID, I'd have to do get element by ID. But since it's a name, title, here, I can say grab the title's value. And then I'll console log it just to make sure at this point in my program, everything is working. Let me split this to the bottom, move it over, pull this down. There we go. I'll say hello world. And it's working. It's getting my data. So I now need to query this little value through an Axios request to the to-do server to have it added to the database. Woof. Well, what is the data type we must send to the backend? Object. So I'm going to declare a new object. I'm going to call this the new to-do. This is an empty object. And it must have at least one value in it. Which one does the API require? Title. So I will give it a title. And what is the value of the title? The one we captured from the user, yeah. So to-do title. All right, I have my new object. It's ready to be sent in a post request. Using Axios, how do I declare a post request? That would be get request, but it's the right syntax. If I just change this to post, now it's a post request. It's very straightforward. We like it that way. So we're going to grab the URL to make the request to from earlier. So post it here, but then I need to tell it what to post. So comma, yeah, this would post an empty object to the database, but what object do I actually want added to the database? New to do. Okay, so send my new to do to be added to the database. Well, it's going to come back with one of two things. What are those two methods called? The dot then and the dot catch. Then brings back which object? Yes. If it's in the request response cycle and things go well, that is a successful response. So we'll just call it response. Comes back with a response. If not, it comes back with an error and we catch it so we can handle it. I'll just console.log the error. Let's console log the response and see what happens. Here's my form. Please work. Send. Ooh, what is that? It has a response.data. Yes, consistency. Open up data. Hey, look, it was added to the database. Prove it. Let's do a GET request. Hey, it's part of the database. Fantastic. You can add data, and then you can get that data. And now this will fire every time I do a post request. What's bad about this user experience, though? Yeah, so where would I do that, and how do I set this back to an empty string? Very close. And the earliest I can do it is right here, because by this point in the program, I have already captured the user's input, right? This line grabs their text. So anywhere after this point, I can erase it from the DOM. It doesn't matter. So I'll say here, add to do form dot title dot value, reset it to an empty string. Then create the to do object from this title and send it to the server.
But isn't all that, isn't that, so the function you just created, this database, to separate that?
It's a good question. What do we think?
There's a difference for the post.
It really depends on how you're using it. So in this case right here, I'm only ever having it happen on a submit event. And so I haven't found a need to break it to a function. It'd probably be better convention. Right, and it's already in a function, so it's still only going to happen when I do this event, so that's great. But I could break this into its own function if I wanted to. So I could call it with other types of submits, but since this will only have one form during a post request, it's safe sitting right inside the event here. The only difference, and I'll revert this, but if we wanted to break this into its own function, we'd say function post to do needs a new to do, and then we could send all of this into there. And now we just have to call post to do and pass in the new to do object. And now this is a reusable function as well, but there's no need to extract this further. Yeah, I would never use this outside of the submit event, so for the time being, I'm just gonna leave it inside of the event listener. And I've done the first two requests as simply as possible, and we already have I mean, I've got a lot of spacing in here, but around 60 lines of code. This is why frameworks exist, but we're going to do this program this way so we see everything imperatively, understand the step-by-step, and then we get to kind of smooth sail for a bit from there. So it may make sense as we're typing out line by line, but then I scroll up here and we see all this code. It's really easy to get lost. So I maybe separate these things. I'd say this is for the post request. This is for the get request. No, that doesn't help a whole lot. At least there's a little separation going on here.
You're working for a big company. Is it kind of a common practice for people to leave comments on big blocks of code like that so other coworkers can know what's going on?
Absolutely, yes. A mix between unit testing and well-commented code makes a happy developer. So as you're learning these, feel free to do comments line by line if that helps. But in professional standards, you use something called JavaScript templates. You know how you do a multi-line comment in JavaScript? /*/ I hear myself. I swear I hear myself. Do I still hear myself? No. Cool. So if we add one more star to the beginning of this, it's now a JavaScript JS doc comment. You can see that show up. So I'll hit enter. Let me just redo this so it templates it out for me. This is completely side note, but it's /**. We get something that looks like this. And it's color coded, which is nice. It's a little hard to read when you're still learning how to read functions though, so I'd maybe wait on this. But just know if you ever see stuff like this in a...
That's the way it would be done in professional work.
Yeah, and then up here I'd say this function takes an array and lists them to the DOM. And then it's like, what is the function name? It's list to-dos. What does it take as parameters? It takes to-dos, which is an array. And it just kind of lets you know what your function does, and then they can go down here and read it to see what's happening. But until you work up to that, I would just say this function lists to-dos to the DOM, and maybe even line by line. Create HTML element. Edit element. Append element. If that answers the question.
Or maybe even looking at realize that your job
Maybe you're a freelancer and you're okay not reading your own code or your own comments. Word to the wise though, I go back to programs I wrote a year ago, and if it weren't for my comments, I wouldn't know how they work until I looked at them for a good half hour. So comments help, for sure. Remind you of the context of where your head was at the time when you wrote it. Okay. So let me stop this here.